Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the trickiest skills to teach young writers, how to move past just retelling a story. We're going to lay out a super clear roadmap to help your students stop summarizing and really start analyzing.
I mean, it's the classic problem for pretty much every English teacher, right? You ask for a deep dive into a character's motivation, and what you get back is a play-by-play of the chapter. So why does this keep happening? And more importantly, how do we help our students make that huge leap into deeper critical thinking?
So here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the basics, what analysis even is. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of using evidence, building paragraphs, and putting it all together in an essay. And we'll wrap up with some really practical tools you can use in your classroom right away.
All right, first up, we have to help students get what we're even asking them to do. It's this fundamental shift from just talking about what happened in a story to digging into the why and the how.
Okay, think about it like this. A summary? That's kind of like a news report. It just gives you the facts, the main points, nice and condensed. But analysis, now that's where you become a detective. You take all those facts, the evidence, and you start looking for clues, for patterns, for the deeper meaning that's hiding just beneath the surface. All right, let's get into our first real building block, using evidence from the text. This is honestly where a lot of students just get stuck. They know they need to include a quote, so they just drop it into the paragraph and then walk away, without ever explaining why it's even there. And that's why I absolutely love this cozy quote analogy. A quote all by itself is just cold and lonely, right? It needs a little help. You can't just plop it down on the page. You've got to wrap your own words around it to give it some warmth, some context, some meaning. So how do you cozy up a quote? Well, it's a pretty simple three-step process. First, you set the scene. Give your reader some context. Then, step 2, you present the actual quote. But here's the magic. The most important part is step 3, adding your commentary. This is the analysis. This is where you explain what that quote actually shows or why it's so important. Okay, let's see this in action. The first part sets the scene perfectly, tells us all about Jacob's backstory. Then, the quote itself is woven in so smoothly. But that last sentence, that's the gold right there. That's the analysis. It tells us what the quote indicates about his family and how it's actually foreshadowing things to come. See, that quote is perfectly cozy.
Okay, so once our students are pros and embedding evidence, what's next? Well, we need to build a solid paragraph around it. And for that, there's a simple but super powerful tool called the CER model. Claim, evidence, reason.
The real beauty of the CER model is just how versatile it is. I mean, it's basically a universal framework for making any kind of argument. You make a claim, you back it up with evidence, and then this is the key. You explain your reasoning. That last step, the part where you explain how the evidence proves your point, that's the heart of analysis. And it works for everything, from an English essay to a science lab report.
And this brings us to a pretty hot topic among teachers. When a student makes their claim, should they tack on the word because? Is it a helpful scaffold, or does it kind of steal the thunder from the reasoning part that's supposed to come later?
Honestly, there are really good arguments on both sides of this one. For younger writers, or when you're outlining a whole essay, adding that because can be a fantastic roadmap. It makes them spell out their main points right from the get-go. But for a single paragraph, or maybe to keep things consistent with science or history class, a lot of teachers prefer a clean, separate claim. They want the reasoning section to do all the heavy lifting of explaining why. So, what's the verdict? Well, it really depends on your students and what you're asking them to do.
All right, let's zoom out a bit. We've got our cozy evidence, we've structured our paragraphs. Now it's time to put all these blocks together into the final product, the Text-Dependent Analysis Essay, or TDA. The number one golden rule of TDA is right there in the name. Your analysis has to depend on the text. Every single claim, every idea, every inference has to be tied directly back to something you can find on that page. No personal opinions, no what-ifs from outside the story. It's all about the text.
So what separates a good TDA from a great one? Well, it's more than just a bunch of CER paragraphs strung together. A really strong TDA is a single, cohesive argument. It kicks off with a super clear thesis. It beautifully weaves together direct quotes and smart inferences. And, this is crucial, it never stops explaining how all that evidence proves the main point. And of course, it's all wrapped up in a formal, organized package.
So this all sounds great, but how do we actually help our students get there? Let's talk about some practical, hands-on tools you can bring into the classroom to make this whole journey from summary to analysis a lot smoother.
You know, a clear rubric might just be your best friend here. It's not just for grading, it's a teaching tool. It shows students exactly what you're looking for. When they can see the description for a top score, in-depth analysis, substantial, accurate reference to text, it gives them a concrete target to aim for.
And it's so important to drive this point home. A great essay doesn't just happen. It's the result of a process. It's a journey. Things like graphic organizers are amazing for this because they help students build good habits. They let them brainstorm, map out their arguments, and organize their evidence before they even think about writing the first sentence.
And finally, something as simple as a checklist can be incredibly empowering for students. It helps them take ownership of their own writing. Just asking them to double-check. Did I plan? Is my evidence from the text? Did I proofread? It reinforces those key steps and puts them in the driver's seat of their own learning.
So when you look at all these pieces together, how can they really transform your students? Well, by teaching writing not as this one giant, scary task, but as a series of smaller, manageable building blocks, we give them a clear path forward. We take this big, abstract idea of analysis and we turn it into a concrete set of skills they can actually practice and master one step at a time.